I always thought trust was the strongest thing you could build. Stronger than the brick walls of the hardware store George and I poured our lives into. Stronger than the mortgage papers I signed to give my son a home. But the way I see it, trust can be a house of cards, and all it takes is one lie to bring it crashing down. My name's Evelyn, and I'm 70 years old, widowed for a decade, living in the same Long Island house where I raised my boy, Michael. You know, after all I'd given him, I never thought he'd be the one to tear it all apart. But that's exactly what he did when he forged my signature to steal everything George and I built. It started on a quiet Tuesday evening, the kind where the Long Island air smells like salt and roses from my garden. I was in my study, sorting through the endless papers that came with running our family hardware store. George and I had started it 40 years ago, a little shop that grew into a community staple. When he passed, I kept it going, not just for money but for him, for us. Every ledger, every invoice was a piece of our legacy. Michael helped out now, handling the bigger accounts, and I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, the boy I'd raised to know right from wrong, the one whose loans I'd cosigned, the one I'd given everything to. That night I was looking for an old tax document when I found it, a paper tucked inside a folder labeled store contracts. It wasn't the usual invoice or receipt. It was a legal document, crisp and official, with my signature at the bottom. Except I hadn't signed it. The document said I'd transferred full ownership of the store to Michael, effective immediately. My heart stopped. My signature was there, clear as day, but it wasn't mine. The loops were too perfect, the slant too careful. I'd been signing my name for 50 years. I knew every curve of it. This was a forgery. I sat there, the paper trembling in my hands as the room seemed to close in. You know, after all I'd given him, I'd never felt so foolish. Michael, my own flesh and blood, and his wife Victoria, always hovering with her sharp smile, they'd done this. I thought of all the times I'd handed Michael the keys to the store, trusting him to carry on his father's dream. I thought of the house I'd helped them buy, the college tuition I'd paid for their daughter. Sophie, had it all been a lie? Have you ever trusted someone so much it blinded you to their lies? I did. And now, staring at that forged signature, I felt like I was waking up from a dream I didn't want to end. I heard the crunch of gravel outside, Michael's car pulling into my driveway. My pulse quickened. I folded the paper and slipped it back into the folder, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. But the way I see it, when someone breaks your trust, you don't just sit there. You fight back. If this story hits home, hit that subscribe button to join women like me, sharing our truths and standing strong. I needed to know what Michael was planning, and I needed to be smart about it. I stood in my kitchen, the chipped mug still warm in my hands, staring out at the garden where the roses George planted years ago were starting to wilt. The way I saw it, you could always tell when something was off with living things. Plants, people, they droop just the same when they're not tended to. I needed to know what Michael was planning, and I needed to be smart about it. But first, I had to keep moving, keep to my routine. Routine keeps you grounded when the world feels like it's tilting. Every morning started the same. I'd wake at 6, before the sun had fully climbed over the Long Island Sound, and make coffee, black, no sugar, just like George liked it. The house was quiet now, too quiet, with only the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I'd slip on my old cardigan, the one with the frayed cuffs, and head out to the garden. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I could still feel George's hands in the soil, his laugh in the breeze. I'd prune the roses, check the tomatoes, and pull a few weeds, all while the neighborhood woke up around me. The mailman would wave, the kids down the street would shout as they ran to the bus stop, and Mrs. Callahan next door would poke her head over the fence to complain about her arthritis or the new stoplight on Main Street. That morning, though, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The roses looked fine, but the mailbox was empty when I checked it at 7, which was strange. Mr. Dawson, our mailman for 20 years, never missed a day, even when it poured. I shook it off, told myself he was probably running late. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, my mind drifting back to Michael and that forged document. Had he been in my mailbox? Had he taken something? I pushed the thought down, poured another coffee, and went back to my routine. By 9, I was in the car. Age, sorting through old tools from the hardware store we ran. George's tools, mostly wrenches, hammers, a level with his initials carved into the handle. I kept them organized, not because I used them much anymore, but because they were his. Michael used to love playing in that store as a boy, stacking paint cans like they were castles. I smiled at the memory, but it soured fast. Michael hadn't been that boy in years. Now he was 42, married to Victoria with a daughter of their own. Sophie, who was 8 and still sent me crayon drawings in the mail. Or she used to. I hadn't gotten one in months. I was wiping down a screwdriver when my phone buzzed on the workbench. It was a text from Michael. "Ma, we're coming by tomorrow. Need to talk about the house." My stomach twisted. The house, my house. The one George and I bought in 78, paid off in 99, the one I'd poured every penny into after he passed. The one that document, my signature scrawled in someone else's hand, said I'd given to Michael. I typed back, "Okay, what about?" No reply. Typical. He'd been dodging my questions for weeks, always too busy, always with an excuse. Victoria was worse. She'd smile that tight-lipped smile, say, "Oh, Evelyn, you worry too much," and change the subject. I set the phone down, my hands trembling just a bit. I wasn't some frail old woman, not at 70. I'd run a business, raised a son, buried a husband. I could handle this. But the unease was there, like a pebble in my shoe, impossible to ignore. I went back to the garden, needing the familiar to steady me. As I clipped a dead rose, Mrs. Callahan leaned over the fence, her gray curls bouncing as she waved. "Evelyn, you see that fancy car parked at your place last week," she said, her voice all gossip and no filter. "Some suit looked like a lawyer or something talking to Michael in your driveway." I froze, shears in hand. "A lawyer?" My voice came out sharper than I meant. "Yup, had a briefcase and everything." "Thought it was odd, with you out at the market." She shrugged, then rambled on about her hydrangeas. "A lawyer, in my driveway, without me there." My pulse quickened, and I felt that old fire in my chest, the one that used to flare when a supplier tried to shortchange us at the store. Michael hadn't mentioned any lawyer. He hadn't mentioned much of anything lately, just vague promises about taking care of things. I thanked Mrs. Callahan, my mind racing, and headed back inside. The house felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the forged document I'd tucked into a drawer. I hadn't confronted Michael yet. I wanted to believe there was an explanation that my son, the boy who used to beg for one more bedtime story, hadn't betrayed me. But Mrs. Callahan's words stuck. A lawyer, a suit, a briefcase. I thought about the empty mailbox again, about Michael's text, about Victoria's cold smiles. The way I saw it, you don't hide things from someone you love unless you've got something to hide. I stood, smoothed my cardigan, and headed to the mailbox one more time, almost on instinct. This time, it wasn't empty. There was a single letter, no return address, just my name in neat black ink. My hands shook as I tore it open, the paper crinkling like it held the weight of the world. The letter felt heavy in my hands, heavier than a single sheet of paper had any right to be. I stood by the mailbox, the late morning sun warming my back, but a chill ran through me all the same. The envelope was plain, no return address, just Evelyn in sharp black ink. I tore it open right there, the sound of ripping paper loud against the quiet street. Inside, a single sentence. "Check your documents before it's too late." No signature, no hint of who sent it. My heart thudded, and for a moment I just stared at the words, willing them to make sense. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, my mind snapping back to Michael, to that forged document I'd found, to Mrs. Callahan's gossip about a lawyer in my driveway. I folded the letter, slipped it into my cardigan pocket, and headed back inside, my steps quicker now. The house was still, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own breathing. I went straight to the kitchen drawer where I'd hidden the forged document, my fingers brushing against it as I pulled the letter out again. "Check your documents." Who would send this? Who knew? I thought of. Sophie, my granddaughter, her sweet little drawings that used to come every month. Could she have seen something, overheard her parents? No, she was only 8. But someone had sent this, someone who didn't want to be named. I sat at the table, the letter open in front of me, and tried to piece it together. Michael had been coming by more often lately, always with Victoria, always with some excuse, dropping off groceries, checking the furnace, just saying hi. But he never stayed long, and his eyes never quite met mine. Victoria was worse, all smiles and, "Oh, Evelyn, you look tired," like she was sizing me up. I'd brushed it off, told myself I was being paranoid. I'd raised Michael to be honest, hadn't I? George and I taught him right from wrong, built a life on trust and hard work. But that document, my signature in someone else's hand, said otherwise. The way I saw it, trust was like a contract, ironclad until someone tears it up. I'd always believed in paperwork, in the solid weight of legal documents. Running the hardware store with George, I'd learned to read every line, check every clause. But this was different. This felt personal. I stood, my knees creaking, and headed to the study, where I kept my files in an old oak cabinet George built. If someone was messing with my documents, I'd find out. The study smelled of dust and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to memories. I pulled open the cabinet, my hands steady despite the knot in my chest. I flipped through folders, tax returns, the deed to the house, George's life insurance payout from 10 years ago. Everything was in order just as I'd left it. But then I paused. A folder labeled Property Records felt off, thicker than I remembered. I opened it, expecting the familiar deed, but there were new pages, ones I didn't recognize. My eyes caught on a date, 2 weeks ago. A transfer request stamped by the county clerk with my signature, again not mine. My breath caught, a sharp little gasp. 2 forged documents now. I sat back in the chair, the letter from the mailbox burning a hole in my pocket. Someone was trying to warn me, but who? And why now? I thought of Mrs. Callahan's words again. A lawyer, a briefcase, Michael in my driveway. I needed answers, but I wasn't about to confront him yet. I'd learned long ago, running a business, that you don't show your hand until you know the game. I picked up the phone and dialed Ruth, my old friend and accountant from the store days. She'd helped us navigate every tax season, every loan, every crisis. If anyone could spot something fishy, it was her. "Evelyn, you sound tense," she said the moment she picked up, her voice warm but sharp, like she could already sense trouble. "Ruth, I need a favor," I said, keeping my tone even. "Can you check if anyone's been poking around my property records? County clerk, maybe." She paused, and I could hear her scribbling something. "Funny you mention that," she said. "I got a call last week from some clerk asking about your house, said they were verifying a transfer request. I told them it sounded odd since UD never mentioned selling. They didn't call back." My grip tightened on the phone. "A transfer request, who filed it?" "Didn't say, but I can dig deeper. You okay, Evelyn?" "I'm fine," I lied, my voice steady but my heart racing. "Just keep this between us." I hung up, the room feeling smaller, the air thicker. A transfer request filed without my knowledge. Michael's text from yesterday echoed in my mind. "Need to talk about the house." I pulled the folder closer, my eyes scanning the new document again. It wasn't just a signature this time. It was a full transfer form, dated and stamped, ready to strip me of the home George and I had built. I slipped the letter and the document into the folder, my resolve hardening. Whatever Michael was planning, I'd find out, and I'd stop it. I sat there, the transfer form in my hands, its crisp edges sharp against my fingers like it was daring me to believe it was real. The study was quiet, save for the faint tick of the clock on the wall, a wedding gift from George's mother. My eyes drifted to it, then to the oak cabinet, and I felt a pull, like a tide dragging me back to years gone by. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, my mind slipping to Michael as a boy, to the life George and I built, to the promises we made. The past always has a way of creeping in when you're trying to make sense of the present. George and I bought this house in '78, back when Long Island was more fields than subdivisions. We were young, barely 30, with a toddler and a dream. The hardware store came first, a little shop on Main Street where we sold nails, paint, and hope to every neighbor who walked in. I handled the books, George handled the customers, and Michael, he was the light of our lives. He'd toddle around, stacking cans, giggling when George pretended to buy his wobbly towers. We worked hard, saved every penny, paid off this house by 99. It was ours, free and clear, a fortress of our own making. I trusted in that, in the solid weight of deeds and contracts. Paperwork was my armor, logic over emotion always. George used to tease me, saying I loved my ledger more than him. I'd laugh, but he wasn't entirely wrong. I leaned back in the chair, the transfer form still in my lap, and closed my eyes. Michael was different back then. He'd bring me dandelions from the yard, call them flowers for Mommy. When George got sick, Michael was there, 25, fresh out of college, sitting by his dad's hospital bed, reading him sports scores. After George passed, it was just us two for a while. I thought we were unbreakable. Even when he married Victoria, I told myself she was good for him, sharp and ambitious, even if her smiles never reached her eyes. I gave them money for their wedding, their first apartment, even helped with Sophie's daycare. You do that for family, you give. But something shifted after Sophie was born. Michael started pulling away, his visits shorter, his calls briefer. Victoria would say things like, "Evelyn, you should rest more," or "You don't need to worry about the details." I thought they were just busy, starting their life. I trusted them. The way I saw it, family was like a contract, two signed in love, sealed in loyalty. I never imagined Michael would break it. A memory hit me then, sharp and clear. It was the summer before George died, when we sat on the porch, the air thick with honeysuckle. He'd taken my hand, his grip weaker than it used to be, and said, "Ev, this house is our legacy. No one can take it from you, not if you hold tight." He'd made me promise to keep it safe for us, for Michael, for the family we'd built. I'd nodded, tears in my eyes, thinking it was just his way of saying goodbye. Now, staring at that forged transfer form, I wondered if he'd sensed something I hadn't. I stood, my knees stiff, and tucked the form back into the folder. I couldn't just sit here, stewing in memories. I needed answers, and the county clerk's office was the place to start. If someone had filed this transfer, there'd be a record, dates, names, signatures. I'd spent years checking invoices for errors. I could spot a fake a mile away. But first, I needed to be sure. I opened the cabinet again, pulling out every file related to the house, deeds, tax records, even the old mortgage papers. I spread them across the desk, my hands moving with the same precision I'd used balancing the store's books. As I sorted, something slipped out from between the pages, an old photo, creased at the corners. Michael, maybe 10, grinning at the camera, holding a hammer in front of the store's grand opening sign. My heart twisted, a mix of love and pain. He'd been so proud that day, so eager to be part of our dream. Where had that boy gone? I traced his face with my finger, then set the photo aside. I couldn't let sentiment cloud my judgment. Not now. I grabbed my purse, slipped the folder inside, and headed for the door. The county clerk's office wasn't far, just a short drive into town. I'd go, ask questions, get answers. Whatever Michael and Victoria were up to, I'd find out. And I'd hold tight to George's promise, no matter what it took. The steering wheel felt cool under my palms as I drove toward the county clerk's office, the folder with the forged transfer form and Michael's old photo tucked in my purse on the passenger seat. The Long Island roads were familiar, lined with old oaks and tidy lawns, but today they felt like a maze closing in. My mind kept circling back to that photo, Michael's gap-toothed grin, his tiny hands clutching that hammer. I shook my head, forcing my focus back to the road. The way I saw it, memories were like receipts, proof of what was, not what is. And right now, I needed proof of what Michael was doing. The county clerk's office was a squat brick building, all fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. I walked in, the folder heavy in my hands, and approached the counter. A young clerk, maybe 25, with a name tag reading Sarah, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice bright but distracted. "I need to verify a property transfer," I said, keeping my tone firm. "For 142 Maple Drive. My name's Evelyn Harper." She tapped at her keyboard, her eyes scanning the screen. Harper, 142 Maple Drive, there's a transfer request in process. Filed 2 weeks ago. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing. You didn't file this. No, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Can you show me the paperwork? She printed out a copy, and I recognized it instantly. The same form I'd found in my files, my signature scrawled in someone else's hand. This isn't mine, I said, sliding the folder across the counter with my real deed. Check it against this. Sarah compared them, her lips pursing. Yeah, the signatures don't match. This is weird. We had someone call about your property last week, said they were representing you. I thought it was routine. My heart skipped. Representing me, who? She flipped through a log sheet on her desk. Thompson, Victoria Thompson, said she was handling things for a family member. Victoria's maiden name. My breath caught, but I brushed it aside. I was here for the form, not some clerk's log. That's not right, I said. What happens now? We can flag it as fraudulent, but it's already in process. You'll need a lawyer to stop it. Officially. She handed me a form to file a dispute, her eyes softening. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper, this happens sometimes. I nodded, my mind racing. Victoria's name on that log sheet nagged at me, but I pushed it down. I'd deal with that later. For now, I had proof the transfer was fake. I filled out the dispute form, my pen steady, and thanked Sarah before heading out. Outside, the air was crisp, the late morning sun glinting off parked cars. I was halfway to my sedan when Mrs. Callahan's voice cut through. Evelyn, what brings you to town? She was standing by her minivan, groceries in hand, her eyes bright with that neighborly curiosity I knew too well. Just some paperwork, I said, forcing a smile. I didn't want to get into it, not here. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know, I saw Victoria at the mall last week buying some fancy handbag. Must have cost a fortune. Funny, with Michael always saying they're strapped for cash. I froze, her words landing like a pebble in still water. She's always liked nice things, I said, keeping my tone light. Probably a gift. Mrs. Callahan shrugged. Maybe just seemed odd. She waved and headed off, leaving me standing there, her words echoing. A handbag. Victoria was always flashy, but Michael had mentioned money troubles last month. I shook my head. Gossip wasn't evidence, I needed facts. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, the folder now heavier with the dispute form. Victoria's name on that log sheet kept circling back, a whisper I couldn't ignore. But I'd built my life on logic, deeds, contracts, numbers. Not rumors, not feelings. Still, the pieces weren't adding up. Michael's evasiveness, the forged document, that anonymous letter. And now Victoria asking about my property behind my back. I drove home, the road blurring as my thoughts churned. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made up my mind. I needed to talk to Michael face to face. No more guessing, no more waiting. I pulled out my phone to call him, but a text from him was already waiting. Mom, can we meet tomorrow? Need to discuss the house. My stomach twisted, a mix of dread and resolve. Tomorrow, then, I'd be ready. Michael's text glowed on my phone screen, the words discuss the house burning into me like a brand. I stood in the kitchen, the same one where I'd taught him to make pancakes, my fingers tight around the phone. The house was silent, too silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, my mind spinning. Was this meeting his idea or hers? Victoria's name on that clerk's log sheet kept nagging at me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, and grabbed the folder from my purse. The forged transfer form, the dispute papers, that old photo of Michael. And the anonymous letter, its creased edges worn from my reading it over and over. I spread everything on the kitchen table, the letter catching my eye. I'd skimmed it so many times, but now I noticed something new, the postmark. It was from Huntington, our town, stamped just a week ago. Someone close, someone who knew me, had sent it. My stomach churned. Who? A neighbor, a friend? Someone who'd seen something I had. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that Michael wouldn't do this. But the evidence was piling up, and I wasn't a fool. Not anymore. I needed to talk to someone I could trust. I dialed Ellen, my friend from the old days at the hardware store. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Evelyn, you okay? It's late." I don't know," I said, my voice catching. "Ellen, have you heard anything about Michael? About him and Victoria, maybe money troubles?" There was a pause, too long. "Well," she said finally, "I didn't want to worry you, but folks have been talking. Michael's been at the bank a lot, asking about loans. And Victoria, she's been flashing cash around, new car, new clothes. I thought maybe you knew." I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. "No," I said, my voice low. "I didn't." "Evelyn, I'm sure it's nothing," Ellen said quickly. "You know how people gossip, but if you're worried, talk to him, straight up." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there, the words new car echoing. Mrs. Callahan's story about Victoria's handbag flashed back, and suddenly it wasn't just gossip. I pulled out the box of old bank statements I kept in the hall closet, the ones I hadn't checked in months because Michael had insisted on helping with my accounts. I flipped through them, my eyes scanning the numbers. There, 3 withdrawals, each $5,000 from my savings account, dates I didn't recognize. No approval from me. My breath came short, sharp. I stared at the statement, the numbers blurring. Michael had access to that account, had since George passed. I'd trusted him, thought he was just organizing things. The way I saw it, family didn't need oversight. Love was. Enough, but love doesn't sign checks behind your back. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to piece it together. The forged transfer form, Victoria's name at the clerk's office, these withdrawals, the letter from someone who knew too much. It was like a ledger that didn't balance, and I'd spent my life balancing ledgers. I stood, pacing the kitchen, my mind racing. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't going to be a discussion. It was going to be a reckoning. I rehearsed what I'd say, my voice low, practicing the words I'd never thought I'd need. "Michael, did you forge my signature? Did you take my money?" I stopped, my throat tight. I could still see him, that boy with the hammer, grinning at me. Could that boy really do this? I wanted to scream, to cry, but I swallowed it down. I'd built a life on facts, not feelings. And the facts were pointing to one thing: betrayal. I sat back down, the bank statement and letter in front of me. I read the letter again. "Your son and his wife are trying to take your house. Check your files." No signature, just that stark warning. Whoever sent it knew enough to point me to the truth. I folded it carefully, my resolve hardening. Tomorrow I'd look Michael in the eye and ask him. No more hiding, no more excuses. The doorbell rang, startling me. My heart pounded. It was too early for Michael. I glanced at the clock, just past 8. I grabbed the papers, shoving them into the folder, and headed to the door, my pulse racing. Whatever was coming, I was ready. Or at least I told myself I was. The doorbell's chime still hung in the air, sharp and jarring, as I clutched the folder to my chest. My heart thudded, expecting Michael's face, his usual half-smile that always softened me. I opened the door, the cold night air rushing in, and there stood Sophie, my granddaughter, her hoodie pulled tight, her eyes wide and darting around nervously. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you." "Sophie," I stepped back, my grip on the folder tightening. "What's wrong, sweetheart? It's late." She slipped inside, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, and I shut the door, my mind racing. Sophie was 16, all elbows and quiet rebellion, but she'd never shown up unannounced like this. She stood in the hallway, twisting the drawstring of her hoodie, avoiding my eyes. I sent it," she said, her voice breaking. "The letter, it was me." My breath caught, the folder suddenly heavy in my hands. "The letter," I said, my voice low, as if speaking too loud might break something fragile. "You sent it, about the house." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't know what else to do. I heard them, Dad and Victoria, talking in the garage last week. They thought I was asleep. They were planning to sell your house, Grandma. They said it was the only way to fix things. The words hit like a punch, knocking the air from my lungs. I sank onto the nearest chair, the folder slipping to my lap. "Sell my house," I repeated, my voice a hoarse whisper. "Michael said that." Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Victoria kept saying it was easy money, that you wouldn't notice until it was done. Dad, he didn't argue with her. He just said they needed to move fast before you figured it out." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't let them do it." I stared at her, my mind a storm of disbelief and pain. Michael, my Michael, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd trusted with my accounts, my home, my heart. Planning to sell the house George and I built, the one we poured every dime into, every hope, every dream. And Victoria, with her name on that clerk's log, her flashy handbag, her whispers in his ear. I'd trusted in paperwork, in deeds and signatures, thinking they were ironclad. The way I saw it, logic kept you safe. But logic hadn't seen this coming. "Sophie," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," she admitted, her shoulders hunching. "Dad's different now. He gets mad, and Victoria, she's always watching me. I wrote the letter because I thought maybe you'd find out without them knowing it was me." I reached out, taking her hand, her fingers cold and trembling. "You did the right thing," I said, though my heart was breaking. "You're brave, sweetheart, braver than I've been." She shook her head, tears spilling over. I love you, Grandma. This is your home. They can't take it." I pulled her into a hug, her small frame shaking against me. For a moment I was back in that memory of Michael, hammer in hand, building that birdhouse with me. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd schemed behind my back. The anonymous letter, the forged form, the bank withdrawals, it all clicked into place, a damning ledger of betrayal I couldn't ignore. "Does your dad know you're here?" I asked, pulling back to look at her. "No," she said quick. "Cly, I told them I was at a friend S. I had to tell you before tomorrow." "Tomorrow, Michael's text about discussing the house." My stomach twisted, a mix of rage and sorrow. He wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to push, to manipulate, to seal the deal he thought I'd never suspect. But now I knew, thanks to Sophie, I knew. "Go home," I told her, my voice firm but gentle. "Don't let them know you were here. I'll handle this." She nodded, wiping her face again. "You won't tell them it was me, will you?" "Never," I promised, my heart aching for her. "This stays between us." After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, the folder open before me. The bank statement, the letter, the forged form, they were evidence, yes, but they were also wounds. I traced the postmark on the letter, Huntington's stamp, a quiet testament to Sophie's courage. My fingers lingered on Michael's old photo, but I set it aside. No more nostalgia, no more excuses. Tomorrow I'd meet Michael. I'd look him in the eye, the son I'd raised, and ask him the truth. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that I'd been blind to it, trusting in documents when I should have trusted my gut. I gathered the papers, my hands steady now, and slipped them into the folder. The clock ticked toward morning, and I sat there, waiting, my heart heavy but my resolve like steel. The clock's ticking filled the kitchen, each second pulling me closer to Michael's arrival. I sat at the table, the folder of evidence, bank statements, forged transfer form. Sophie's letter spread out like a battle map. My hands were steady, but my heart was. It pounded, heavy with the weight of what? Sophie had told me, the truth I couldn't unsee. Michael, my son, plotting to sell my home. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, my fingers tracing the edge of the anonymous letter. I'd built my life on facts, on the solid ground of paperwork and logic. But that ground was crumbling, and I was done being blind. The doorbell rang, sharp and final like a gavel. I stood, smoothing my sweater, and walked to the door, the folder tucked under my arm. Through the peephole, I saw Michael, his familiar broad shoulders, but next to him was Victoria, her smile too bright, her handbag gleaming under the porch light. My stomach twisted. I opened the door, my face a mask of calm. "Mom," Michael said, stepping inside, his voice warm but practiced. "Good to see you." He hugged me, brief and stiff, and Victoria followed, her perfume sharp, her smile all teeth. "Evelyn," she said, tilting her head. "You look well. We just wanted to check in, talk about things." I nodded, gesturing to the living room. "Sit," I said, my voice clipped. They settled on the couch, Victoria crossing her legs, her heels clicking softly. I stayed standing, the folder heavy in my hands. The way I saw it, there was no point in small talk. Not anymore. Michael, I said, my voice steady but cold, why did you forge my signature on a property transfer form? The air shifted, like a door slamming shut. Michael's smile faltered, his eyes flicking to Victoria. She leaned forward, her expression smooth. Evelyn, what are you talking about? That's a serious accusation. I opened the folder, pulling out the transfer form, the clerk's log with her name scrawled across it. This, I said, holding it up. Your name, S on the county records, Victoria. And these, I slapped the bank statements on the coffee table, the unauthorized withdrawals circled in red. $5,000 3 times from my savings. Care to explain? Michael's face went pale, his mouth opening, then closing. Mom, we were just trying to help. You've been stressed and... Help! I cut him off, my voice rising. By forging my name, by taking my money. My hands shook, but I pressed on. Sophie told me everything. You're planning to sell this house. My house. Victoria's smile vanished, her eyes narrowing. Sophie, that girl's always been dramatic. You can't believe everything she says. She's not the one lying, I snapped, my anger flaring. I trusted you, Michael. I gave you access to my accounts, my home, because you're my son. And this is how you repay me. Michael shifted, his hands clasped tight, his eyes for a moment meeting mine with a flicker of desperation. Mom, it's not what you think. We're in trouble, debts. The business isn't doing well. We thought selling the house would give us a fresh start. A fresh start? I repeated, my voice breaking. By stealing my home, the one your father and I built. Victoria leaned forward, her voice smooth, almost soothing. Evelyn, you're not seeing the big picture. We have a power of attorney. You signed it last year, remember? It gives us the right to make decisions for you, for your own good. My blood ran cold. Power of attorney, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I never signed that. Oh, but you did, Victoria said, pulling a document from her bag. Our smile returning. Right here, witnessed and notarized. Our lawyer, Mr. Grayson, handled it. You were a bit out of it that day, Evelyn. We didn't want to worry you. I stared at the paper, my name scrawled at the bottom in a signature that wasn't mine. My heart pounded, my mind racing back to last year. Hospital visits after my fall, Michael bringing me papers to sign, saying they were just for estate planning. I'd trusted him, trusted the logic of documents, the safety of signatures. My greatest blind spot laid bare. They hadn't just forged one form, they'd built a whole conspiracy, roping in a lawyer to make it legal. Who's Grayson? I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Some crook you paid off. Michael flinched, but Victoria didn't blink. He's a professional, she said coolly. And the sale's already in motion. The buyer's ready to close next week. It's done, Evelyn. The room spun, my chest tight. My home, the walls that held George's laughter. Sophie's crayon scribbles, my life, it was slipping away. But something inside me snapped into focus, sharp and unyielding. They thought they'd won, thought I'd crumble. They didn't know me. You're wrong, I said, my voice low, steady. This isn't done, not by a long shot. Victoria's eyes flickered, a crack in her composure. Michael looked away, his hands fidgeting. I turned, grabbing my phone from the table. Get out, I said, my voice like steel. Both of you. Mom, please, Michael started, but I cut him off. Out. They left, Victoria's heels clicking, Michael's shoulders slumped. I shut the door, my hands trembling but my mind clear. I scrolled through my contacts, finding Robert, my old friend and lawyer from the store days. He'd know what to do about a forged power of attorney. I hit call, my heart still racing, but my resolve unbreakable. This wasn't over. The phone was still warm in my hand, Robert's voice steady on the other end. Evelyn, I'm coming over, he said, his tone clipped but kind. Don't touch those papers, we'll figure this out. I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and hung up, my eyes fixed on the folder. The forged power of attorney sat on top, my name mocked in someone else's scrawl. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, my chest tight with a grief I couldn't name. Michael's face, young and laughing, kept flashing in my mind, but I pushed it away. No more illusions. The clock showed just past 9 when Robert's car pulled into the driveway, headlights cutting through the dark. I opened the door before he could knock, his familiar face, gray hair, sharp eyes, the same suit jacket he'd worn since we ran the store together, grounding me. "Evelyn," he said, stepping inside, "you okay?" "No," I admitted, my voice low, "but I will be." I led him to the kitchen, spreading the folder's contents across the table. The bank statements, the transfer form, Sophie's letter, and that damning power of attorney. "They're trying to sell my house, Robert, Michael, and Victoria. They forged this." I pointed to the document, my finger trembling. Robert adjusted his glasses, scanning the papers. His brow furrowed, and he let out a slow breath. "This power of attorney, it's notarized, but something's off. The notary's name, Clara Henshaw, I've seen it before. She's tied to Grayson, their lawyer. He's got a reputation for cutting corners." "Grayson," I repeated, the name sour in my mouth. "Victoria mentioned him, said he handled everything." Robert nodded, flipping through the bank statements. "These withdrawals, the timing, the forged form, it's a pattern. Grayson's been linked to shady real estate deals before. I'd bet he's helping them push this sale through." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "Evelyn, this is serious, but we can fight it." "Fight it how?" I asked, my voice catching. "They said the sale's closing next week. I trusted those papers, Robert. I thought they protected me." My hands clenched, the weight of my greatest blind spot crashing down. I'd believed in the sanctity of signatures, of legal documents, thinking they were my shield. But they'd been turned against me, twisted by my own son. Robert leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "First, we file for an emergency injunction to stop the sale. That'll buy us time. Then we challenge the power of attorney. If it's forged, as I suspect, it's invalid. We'll need a handwriting expert, and I'll pull records on Grayson and this notary. If they're dirty, we'll expose them." I nodded, my mind racing but my heart sinking. "This means I'll have to face Michael in court, doesn't it?" Robert's face softened. "Yes, it might come to that." "Are you ready for it?" I looked down at the table, at the photo of Michael I hadn't put away, his boyish grin frozen in time. For a moment, I was back in our old backyard, teaching him to ride a bike, his laughter filling the air. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd betrayed me, who'd let Victoria's greed poison him. The grief was sharp, cutting deep, but something else stirred. A fire, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady now. "This is my home, Robert, George's home. They don't get to take it." He smiled, a small, proud thing. "That's the Evelyn I know, the one who stared down suppliers and balanced books like a general. We'll fight this and we'll win." We spent the next hour mapping out the plan. Robert made calls, his voice sharp as he spoke to a colleague about filing the injunction first thing in the morning. I listened, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I hadn't touched, the steam long gone. My mind kept circling back to Michael, to the moment I'd confront him in court. Would he look at me? Would he see the mother who'd given him everything, or just an obstacle to his plans? "Evelyn," Robert said, breaking my thoughts, "we'll need you to make a statement. Everything you know. Sophie's letter, the withdrawals, the forged documents. It's your word against theirs, but with this evidence, we've got a strong case." "Sophie," I said softly, my heart aching for her. "She can't be dragged into this, she's just a kid." "We'll keep her out of it," he promised. "Her letter's enough for now, but you'll need to be strong. Grayson's slippery and Victoria's sharp. They'll try to twist this." "Let them try," I said, my voice like iron. "I've spent my life building this home, this family. I'm not letting them tear it down." Robert packed up the papers, promising to meet me at the courthouse tomorrow. As he left, the house felt quieter, heavier, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked to the window, looking out at the front yard where George and I had planted roses, where Sophie had played as a child. This was my place, my legacy. I'd face Michael, Victoria, Grayson, anyone who stood in my way. The courtroom was waiting, and I was ready to fight. The roses outside glowed faintly under the streetlight, their petals curling in the night air. I stood at the window, my hands pressed against the cool glass, my mind already in the courthouse. Tomorrow, I'd face Michael, Victoria, and their crooked lawyer, Grayson. The thought of seeing my son across a courtroom, not as my boy but as my adversary, twisted something deep inside me. You know, after all I'd given them, I thought, the words a bitter echo. But I wasn't the woman who'd trusted blindly in signatures and promises anymore. I'd learned my lesson, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. The next morning, the courthouse loomed like a gray fortress, its steps slick from an early rain. Robert met me at the entrance, his briefcase heavy with our evidence. Sophie's letter, the forged power of attorney, the bank statements circled in red. "You ready, Evelyn?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "As I'll ever be," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. We walked inside, the air thick with the smell of polished wood and old paper. The courtroom was small, the judge's bench high and imposing. Michael and Victoria were already there, sitting stiffly beside Grayson, a man with slicked-back hair and a suit too sharp for his shifty eyes. Michael wouldn't meet my gaze, but Victoria's stare was cold, her lips a tight line. The hearing began, the judge's voice cutting through the tension. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter, you're seeking an emergency injunction to halt the sale of your property. Proceed." Robert stood, his voice clear and commanding. "Your Honor, my client's son and daughter-in-law have orchestrated a scheme to sell her home without consent, using a forged power of attorney and unauthorized bank withdrawals." He laid out the evidence, each document a blow. The transfer form, the bank statements. Sophie's letter. I watched the judge's face, her eyes narrowing as she studied the papers. Grayson rose, his smile oily. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. Mrs. Carter signed the power of attorney willingly. She's elderly, perhaps confused." "Confused?" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. The judge's gavel tapped lightly, but I pressed on. "I built a business, raised a family, paid every bill for that house. I'm not confused. They forged my name." The courtroom went quiet, the air heavy. Michael shifted, his hands clasped tight, still avoiding my eyes. Victoria whispered something to Grayson, her face unreadable. Robert seized the moment. "Your Honor, we have a witness who can speak to Mr. Grayson's credibility or lack thereof." A woman stepped forward, mid-50s, her posture rigid. "I'm Linda Hayes," she said, her voice steady. "I worked with Mr. Grayson 5 years ago. He pressured me to notarize documents I knew were questionable. I refused and was fired." She glanced at me, her eyes kind but resolute. "I've seen him do this before. Target vulnerable people for profit." Grayson's face reddened, his objections stumbling. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Enough," she said. "Based on the evidence and testimony, I'm G." Ranting the injunction. The sale is halted pending a full investigation into the power of attorney and related documents. Mrs. Carter, you retain control of your property. Relief flooded me, my shoulders sagging as the weight lifted. But when I looked at Michael, his head bowed, his hands trembling, the victory felt hollow. My son, my boy, had done this. I wanted to cross the room to shake him, to ask why. But I stayed rooted, my hands gripping the table. After the hearing, Robert walked me to my car. "We're not done," he said. "I'll file to revoke the power of attorney and freeze your accounts to prevent further withdrawals. But Evelyn, you did it. You stopped them." "For now," I said, my voice quiet. "What about Michael?" Robert sighed. "He'll face consequences, maybe legal, maybe just his own guilt. That's his burden now." I drove home, the courthouse fading in my rear view. At the bank, I changed every password, every access code, locking Michael and Victoria out. I called a locksmith to secure the house, my hands steady as I gave instructions. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, the woman who'd built a life from scratch, who'd survived loss and betrayal before. But the ache for Michael lingered, a bruise that wouldn't fade. Pulling into my driveway, I sat for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. The house stood solid, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. It was mine again, at least for now. But as I stepped out, the weight of what I'd lost, my son, my trust, settled over me. I'd won the battle, but the war for my family was far from over. The car door clicked shut behind me, the sound sharp in the quiet afternoon. I stood in the driveway, my eyes tracing the familiar lines of the house, our house, George's and mine. The roses we'd planted together nodded in the breeze, their red petals vivid against the white siding. I'd won today, kept this place from slipping away, but the victory tasted bittersweet. Michael's face in the courtroom, his eyes downcast, his hands shaking, it haunted me. You know. After all I'd given them, I thought, the ache in my chest a constant companion. But I couldn't dwell there, not anymore. I had to move forward. Inside, the house was still, the air heavy with memories. I walked to the living room, where George's old armchair sat by the window, its leather worn from years of his laughter and stories. Sophie's drawings, pinned to the fridge since she was 6, curled at the edges. I touched one, her crayon sun bright against a blue sky, and my heart twisted. This home wasn't just walls and a roof, it was our family's story, the one I'd fought to protect for her for the future. Michael had tried to take that, but he hadn't won. Not entirely. I sat at the kitchen table, pulling out a sheet of stationery, the kind George used to tease me for keeping. My pen hovered, then moved, words spilling out for Sophie. "My dearest girl," I wrote, "this house is yours always. It's where your grandpa and I built our dreams, where you played and grew. I'll keep it safe for you no matter what." I paused, my throat tight. "I love you and I'm proud of you for being brave." I folded the letter, sealing it with a promise to give it to her when she was older, when she could understand the weight of what had happened. The phone rang, Robert's name flashing on the screen. "Evelyn," he said, his voice warm but businesslike, "the injunction's holding. I've got the paperwork to revoke that power of attorney and we're setting up a trust for Sophie. Your assets are locked down, no one can touch them now." "Thank you, Robert," I said, my voice softer than I meant, "for everything." "You did the heavy lifting," he replied. "You stood up to them, that's what matters." After we hung up, I walked through the house, touching the things that anchored me. George's favorite coffee mug, the quilt I'd made for Sophie's 10th birthday, the photo of us 3 on the porch, Michael's absence a shadow in the frame. I'd trusted in legal papers, in signatures and systems, thinking they'd protect me. That was my greatest blind spot, my mistake. But I'd learned my strength wasn't in documents. It was in me, in the life I'd built, the love I'd poured into this home, into Sophie. I stepped outside, the evening air cool against my skin. The roses caught the last light, and I knelt to touch their petals, remembering George's hands in the soil beside mine. I'd lost Michael, maybe forever, and that pain would linger, a scar I'd carry. But I wasn't broken. I'd fought for this house, for Sophie, for myself. And I'd won not just the legal battle, but something deeper, the right to define my own legacy. Sitting on the porch, I watched the stars begin to prick the sky, each one a quiet promise. I thought of Sophie, of the years ahead, of the stories I'd tell her about her grandpa, about this house. I thought of the women out there, like me, who'd faced betrayal and found their way through. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. This home, this life, it was mine to keep, to pass on, and that was enough. The stars blinked above, steady and quiet, as I sat on the porch, the night wrapping around me like a familiar shawl. I'd faced the unthinkable, my own son, Michael, trying to take my home, my memories, my everything. You know, after all I'd given them, that betrayal cut deep, a wound I'll always carry. But sitting here in the house George and I built, I felt something stronger than the pain. I'd fought back, not just for the deed or the dollars, but for me, for Sophie, for the legacy we'd pass on. I wasn't the woman who trusted too easily anymore. I was Evelyn, and I was enough. Life has a way of testing you, stripping away what you thought was certain. But it also shows you what's unbreakable. Your heart, your will, your love for those who matter. I learned to stand tall, to protect what's mine, and to keep going even when it hurts. If you've ever felt betrayed, like your world's been turned upside down, know this. You're not alone, and you're stronger than you think. Share your story with us. Your voice matters. Subscribe to hear more stories of women like us, finding their way through. And if you can, support groups that protect folks from losing their homes, their dignity, to greed. Together, we can hold tight to what's ours.